the Culture Illiterate One-Shots, a podcast, a sub-series of a podcast, really, where four friends talk about movies that left a mark on them. And notice I say left a mark, not necessarily movies that they fully endorse. I am Jake, and I'm going to start using the fun fact section for hot takes. And here's one. I think baseball is the only sport that should have playoff series lasting longer than 3 games.
Amen.
Oh, wow. I thought you and Jason were going to shit on me for that.
No,
No.
I think, I don't watch hockey.
Especially coming off the back of 2 Game 7s in the NBA last night, as of the day we recorded this.
I don't, fully agree with you, because I think that championship series in the NBA should be best of 7. That said, I think, the first 2 rounds drag on a little bit too long, many years, so... That said,
I thought I was going to get so much more pushback.
No, but that said, the Pacers beating the pants off the Knicks yesterday, God, that made me feel things.
Good things.
Because I do hate the Knicks very much.
Fuck New York.
And hate is just as strong as love.
Well, I agree, because it does slog for quite a while. Because, I don't know, I feel like a best of what was it again? Best of 3? No, best of 7.
I think baseball is the only sport that should go beyond best of 3 in the postseason.
I don't agree, but I don't disagree. I get where you're coming from.
I kind of agree, mostly because penalties are they're such they're so prominent in the basketball and football world that they just take such a long time. While baseball, because mostly thanks to the pitch clock, has been gracefully short and more enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I also what was I gonna say? I think I definitely agree that the NBA playoffs should be shortened, but I don't necessarily agree that it should be all best of 3 series. That said, what the fuck was the other thing I was gonna say?
You're gonna intro yourself.
There's also more parity in baseball in the sense that I think more often a worse team can go on a run and win a best of 7 series than in basketball, which I think is why they should have best of 7 series, because that's more fun to watch. That's why playoff baseball is so great. That said, my name's Jason, and I didn't prepare a fun fact, but I will go with I love the band Snapcase. That's it. It's a good band. So that's my fun fact. I like Snapcase.
Cool. Well, my name's Matt. And my fun fact is the second intergalactic war has started for Helldivers 2. And me, alongside my Democratic brothers and sisters, have engaged in guerrilla warfare. And it has been an incredibly fun yet stressful time. And I feel like I may be suffering from robot PTSD.
Bro, I don't play Helldivers, so I thought Matt was just generating new podcast lore, and I was really excited.
The way Matt said that.
God, are we gonna LARP on the podcast now?
The way Matt put that, where it was just the most Matt's dying inside.
I don't
talking about how there's a war.
Oh God, and that was Mike's cancer.
I don't know what to say to any of that, to be honest.
Matt's fucking dying in the space trenches.
It sounds like it from the audio. I just muted him, but it sounded like it from his audio coming out. So how about you? Who are you, other person?
That's a good question. Do I need to say more?
I would prefer if you did, handsome.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'm Sean. My fun fact, and I can steal this from Jake because we're going to talk about it anyways, and I can segue this right into the movie. Bloodshot was the last movie we saw before everything got shut down from COVID. This was the last movie we saw in theaters before, like, when was I guess 2022 was the next time that we saw anything in theaters again, or was it 2021?
It had to have been
I don't
22,
remember.
I think.
I
I
feel
would
like it
think
was
so.
2022 because then we started to
I
get
think
into.
it was 22 because I
That
don't.
was when
Getting on that A list.
Yeah, that was when we got on A list and
Yeah.
everything. So I think it was 2022.
So for 2
Yeah.
years, the last memory in a theater that we had was Vin Diesel's Bloodshot.
Oh wait, you know what? I can look at. I know the last movie. I'm between one or two things. Is my first movie back to theaters. Let me see. It was 2021 because I saw the Mortal Kombat movie in theaters, not upon its immediate release, but later in like the summer of 2021. I want to say. As well as Godzilla. I watched Godzilla vs. Kong also for the first time on Max, at the time HBO Max, and then went to go see it in theaters so I could see it on the big screen later that summer. And I think somewhere around then may have been when does that when we saw Wrath of Man, Jason?
I don't know, but that movie's
Yeah,
sick.
Wrath of Man 2021. That's a rec for you, Wrath of Man. Yeah,
Mortal
summer
Kombat.
2021.
The Mortal Kombat movie was really fucking bad.
It was really disappointing, but I'll tell you what though. Here, when the theme kicks in, a scorpion appears at the end on like theater sound was pretty sick.
I'm sure
Anyway.
that's true. The movie.
COVID-19. I agree.
I'm trying to see.
We're
Okay,
covering-
I was trying to at
what's
the
up?
same time look up what the what I had first seen in 2021. It goes back to September, man, that we had the AMC. I think this was it. This was the first movie that I saw. It was that we got back into theaters for. Why can't I check what it is? Oh no. What is it? I just have the order.
I also had one intermediate one because my fiance Priya, for a birthday gift, rented a theater for me. When we watched the 2014 Ninja Turtles movie in it, just the two of us. So technically, I did have one in between there in like April 2020.
The one that I have is from
Yes, you
June.
are.
The one that I have is from June 1st of 2021, and it was Fast 9.
Ooh.
At least that's the earliest I can find, so who knows? It could have been earlier, but that was it.
Nine, the Fast Saga.
Okay,
another smooth transition into this movie. They're talking about Fast and Furious. So we are covering Bloodshot, which released on March 13th, 2020. It was the last movie. Me, Jason, and Sean and my dad saw it like the day before lockdown hit in our area. Saw it and then went and I got to IHOP afterwards and I got chicken and waffles and they were kind of disappointing, just like the movie was. Bloodshot stars Vin Diesel as the titular Bloodshot, sometimes known as Ray Garrison, Isaac Gonzalez as KT, Sam Heughan as Jimmy Dalton, Toby Kebbell as Martin Axe, Tallulah Riley as Gina Garrison, Lamorne Morris as Wilfred Wiggins, Guy Pearce as Dr. Emil Harding, Johannes Hakor Johannesson as Nick Barris, Alex Hernandez as Tibbs, Siddharth Danajay as Eric. And the movie was written by Jeff Wadlow and Eric Heiserer, directed by Dave Wilson, and shot by Jacques Geoffrey. I don't know, French people, you know. Given Diesel is currently being sued for alleged sexual battery and retaliation, we will be, as a podcast, making a donation to the National Sexual Violence Research Center. And if you want to do that yourself, which we'd encourage you to do, or just learn more about that, you can go to https:// www.nsvr.org nsvrc.org/donate. Anyway, I'm realizing we didn't do other than that brief Wrath of Man reference. We didn't do any Rex or story time. Does anyone have anything they want to throw in before I dive into the plot of Bloodshot?
I recommend Helldivers 2.
Fighting for democracy.
This is Matt's.
Yeah.
This is Matt's entire personality, although I've joined him.
I was about to say,
I
you're a
could be
fellow
annoying.
democracy brother.
I can be annoying, and I will be, and talk about the album I talked about last episode, which I also got physically since then, because it came out since then, and it's fantastic. I recommend it still, and it is literally the coolest vinyl record I personally own. Everything about it looks really sick. So
I can verify that claim.
See on the Skype call, even though we don't post video.
Yeah, it's so. I wanted you guys to see it. We can post pictures maybe. But yeah,
I can verify.
Knocked Loose. When you won't go before you're supposed to. Fantastic record. Like, perfect in my opinion. So, showing Matt pictures of the record because it's so sick, and I'm obsessed with it. But yeah, I still recommend it because it came out now, and I've actually heard the whole thing. It's fantastic. Also recommend a band called Speed, hardcore band from Australia. They're fantastic.
I recommend the drug Speed.
Whoa, I don't.
No, I don't. That's a joke. Legal reasons, that is a joke.
Oh, is that even a real drug?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
It's a slang.
It's a slang term.
For what?
Google it.
A drug, Matt.
No, I don't want to be on an FBI list.
For nanites in your bloodstream.
Hey,
Nanites in your bloodstream.
All right. So.
Oh, we're like Bloodshot.
Yeah, there you go, buddy.
Oh my.
Okay. So two questions I want to ask before we get into this viewing. So it was Matt's. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but this was Matt's first viewing of Bloodshot. I had seen. Thanks for the hearts in the Skype chat, Matt. Hope you're having fun.
I am.
I have seen this movie now 4 times. Once in theaters, once on the 1-year anniversary of lockdown. We got together again, none of us having COVID-19, and watched it and ordered IHOP delivery. And I got drunk and watched it with the aforementioned fiance Priya once before. And then this time I was on an edible watching it. So this is my 4th viewing of this movie, if you can believe that that's how I've spent my time. I believe this is the 3rd viewing for Jason and Sean, who I think were both at that 1-year anniversary of lockdown hangout.
Yeah, I was, though I will say I completely forgot about it until you mentioned it when we were watching it this time. So
you remember this movie?
In some sense, my 2nd time watching it, though literally my 3rd.
Yeah, and I wasn't part of the friend group when these 3 watched it together.
No.
That's a lie.
That's not true.
That's a lie.
I was kind of the latecomer. I'm basically the Ringo Starr of the group.
Full of
Despite
shit,
the fact
man.
that you and I were co-workers and worked together as quote-unquote essential workers throughout the pandemic, we didn't really hang out for a while during it. I would like to say.
Yeah, because Jake didn't like me.
You didn't make plans. There was
Matt,
I'm not doing that.
Listen, we went out of our fucking way.
Jake probably didn't want to hang out with you because you're a minority.
With you on Skype. We fucking watched TV with you on Skype. You're a piece of shit, man.
It's been a long time since I didn't like you, Matt.
It's been a long time since I hated you.
See, it happened though.
You rounded the corner quite a while ago.
Another episode we can recap my initial opinions on Matt and how we met. But for now, I want to ask you guys a couple questions. The first being, so the reason I picked this movie is I am a very big fan of Valiant Comics, particularly the 2012 iteration till about, God, was it around this time, actually around 2020, when they got bought out by DMG, which is like a giant Chinese conglomerate that basically bought them to be an IP farm and have not actually successfully licensed anything, I believe, with that. So, and their books are starting to make a bit of a comeback again because there's a new publisher helping out with that like side of things. But anyway, Valiant was a really huge publisher in the 90s. They're quote unquote the third, they call themselves the third biggest superhero universe. And it's a world and a set of books that I am a huge fan of. And I selected this movie because to date, this is the only like real live action adaptation or adaptation in general of a Valiant book. So that's a very loose way of using adaptation, to be honest. So that said, I am also aware that I am the only person who had any kind of attachment to like the original like the character and the things that this is sort of pulling from. So I was curious, for those, Matt, you will obviously be able to answer this more easily since you just watched it for the first time. But for all of you, the first time you saw the movie, what were your like preconceived, like what were your notions about the character and what you were going to see? I'm just curious, since I came in with this with a lot of like baggage of having read a lot of Bloodshot before, and you guys, the only thing you really knew about Bloodshot, I would assume, is via me.
Yes, exactly. I didn't. I knew everything I knew about Mr. Raymond Felton. Bloodshot. That's his name, right?
Ray Garrison?
Raymond Felton. Yeah, I knew very little about Bloodshot, and everything that I knew was from Jake. I don't really know how to read, so I don't read comic books the way that Jake does.
Well, I can't read.
Yeah, you know that Vine where the guy goes, "I never fucking learned how to read." That's me. But yeah, so but Jake loves to talk about the things that he loves, and so I did hear quite a bit about Bloodshot in some sense through him, and so I was pretty excited for this movie coming out, like when it was like initially conceived. Though the more I saw about it leading up to the film, I was like, oh, it's not gonna be good.
And then it ended up being fantastic,
So good.
right?
I'm pretty
Awesome.
sure when we walked out of the theater, the first thing I said to you guys was, that wasn't very good. Which is
Because-
important to note. I didn't say that was bad or that wasn't good. That wasn't very good.
That's because it was very great, right?
We'll get to that.
It's amazing. What an amazing game.
I mean, I think
Game.
Matt's fucking thinking about Helldivers this whole time, honestly.
Yeah, Matt's
tuned out. He's just thinking about, God, it's such a good game.
okay.
He hasn't heard anything we've said.
He hears what we're talking about and is just like, oh god, I wish I was fighting in a war again.
Let troops lead me.
It never changes. So with that, I guess I'm kind of. Oh, sorry, were you gonna say something, Sean?
I was gonna say, speaking to what Jason said, it was pretty similar to me, where like I had a lot more information from you, and you've given me a couple of the Valiant books at this point, which I've read. So at the very least, I have like a little more of an understanding of it, and so this movie always hurts me inside.
Yeah. So I before we get further into things, if you guys could give me if you had to tell someone, if someone like a stranger came up to you and they knew absolutely nothing about Bloodshot, and you had to describe the character in like 1 to 3 sentences, I want to know how you guys would describe it, because this version is very different in a lot of ways. But I kind of want to see, but again, because I have like that baggage and expectation, I'm curious how it comes across to y'all without that.
Wait, so are we describing how we see him in the movie? Or how we
if you were tasked with explaining the character of Bloodshot, like, just real quick to someone who knew nothing, like, how would you explain or describe the character?
He loves to grit his teeth.
He goes, ugh, a lot.
5 years. 5 years. Wait, oh my God! Pandemic was in 2020. Do you believe it's been almost 5 years?
5 years.
Yes. This isn't funny to anyone else, but if you've heard,
we'll get to it.
Well, we will, but if you've heard the way Vin Diesel says 5 years in this movie, you're laughing with us. But we'll get to that. That's
honestly, this
point.
movie is great at is forcing emotion out of Vin Diesel and just making him act other than like his usual stoicism. And so it's so
I think the
good.
word act is a little generous here.
Oh no,
I think
he acts.
He's
he
just kind of there.
But, no.
He
acts. He acts.
He's just there.
He acts, but I'm not saying it's good. But
yeah,
I'll give him this. He has wonderful comedic timing.
Well, I think that's unintentional, Matt, and I think that
I don't know. It could be like a secret genius.
He feels less like acting and more like just like pretending. He kind of, he sounds like? He sounds like if you're helping your like actor friend remember their lines and you're like kind of trying to give the emotion that the character's supposed to have, but also you're not an actor, so you aren't really fully there.
But you're trying better than you normally would if you...
Right, you're not just reading the lines, but you're not, like, full-on acting, because you can't. That's how Vin Diesel feels in this movie, if I were to be honest.
Okay, does anyone have anything for an answer other than he likes to grit his teeth? If that's all, that's fine. That's valid. I just don't want to move on before y'all have your say.
That he's some kind of
Suicide Squad?
Fuck.
Not yet. We'll get to that. We'll get to that one day. We'll resume the original quest one day, Sean.
No
spoilers.
No spoilers.
I would just say that he's some kind of
Suicide Squad.
Cybernetic assassin. I don't know if I'm using cybernetic correctly.
Would he be
cybernetic? I thought he said erectly.
No,
I said correctly.
I said correctly, but I was laughing, so I might not have enunciated it well.
No, he said erectly.
I was thinking about Helldivers again, so erections came up naturally.
Because I'm thinking like cybernetic. He's got some cyber genetics, right? So, yeah, I'm calling him cybernetic, and fuck you. That's all. That's all right. I'm arguing with myself. Anyway, I'd say that he's a cybernetic, like hitman type soldier that has healing abilities and is a stone cold face, badass kind of guy. Yeah, I guess if I were to take a stab at it.
It's so easy to just describe him as Soldier Man with
that's
nanobots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe this is a better question. If someone said, "Could you like draw a comparison to like one or two like Marvel DC superheroes that a person like if someone's like Bloodshot, who's he like?"
Say like
I'm here.
Punisher mixed with Wolverine. Based off of what I know in this film, is my best assessment.
Okay, That's fair. I mean, that I would say that's pretty as close as you can get. I was just curious because I definitely want to kind of talk. Like one of the things that interests me as a fan of the source material is the many deviations. So I definitely am going to kind of go over those as we go. But real quick, so the movie starts off super basic and it kind of presents itself as just a really typical like military-esque revenge movie. So after leading a successful rescue mission of hostages in Mombasa, U.S. Marine Ray Garrison and his wife Gina travel for a holiday in Italy beach house townside of the Amalfi Coast. They are kidnapped by a group of mercenaries led by Martin Axe, who demands to learn how the U.S. military had learned about the hostages and their location. When Ray explains that he cannot answer, Axe executes Gina in front of him. Ray vows revenge, and then Axe kills Ray as well. An amnesiac Ray then awakens in the labs of Rising Spirit Technologies, which the first thing I just want to note is that name is changed from the comics, for reasons I'm unclear on. In the comics, it's Project Rising Spirit. But anyway, a company in Kuala Lumpur, so still back in Malaysia, sorry, what was I? Specializing in cybernetic enhancements for disabled U.S. military personnel. The CEO and lead scientist, Dr. Emil Harding, tells Ray that he's the first human subject from the Bloodshot program that they've been able to successfully resurrect, and heal by replacing his entire bloodstream with experimental nanotechnology. The technology increases his strength and heals his injuries, but the nanites need to be regularly replaced and recharged or he'll succumb to the damage and die again.
Can I talk about how I replaced every mention of Bloodshot in the script with Bloodshit?
Sure. Do you have a whole lot to say about that?
I just think it's funny.
Genius.
I think my comedic genius is funny. Fuck you.
Yeah, sure it is, buddy. So the movie starts off, and I'm like sort of consciously trying to avoid like spoilers till later in the episode, just because from like the first, if you're watching this for the first time, this is, I think, perhaps the most as generic as you can imagine a movie gets to start. It is your typical kind of like American film with very like pro-military propaganda. The Ray and his like crew of Marines have these, say things like "no mission too great" or some shit like that, and it's just like white dudes in camo killing brown people to save a pretty girl, and
it's just America.
That's it. It literally it plays like an ad for enlisting in the U.S. Army in the opening sequence. And I also do want to comment that is thankfully the opening action scene where he is rescuing the hostages is the worst of the movie, because it is really it's like unwatchable. You cannot tell what's going on. You have the layout of the room they're in is unclear, and it's just really unpleasant and choppily cut.
Yeah.
And and it of course does the like we're in a non-Western country, so here's it's not really a piss filter, but it does have a clearly this place is filter. So yeah, I mean it is as stereotypical as it comes, and it is not a great first impression, the opening scenes.
It really is. Like, obviously I didn't like this scene, but just hearing Jake put it the way he put it just made it click how like really bad it was. We're not even getting into like the narrative reasons that it's bad, which we will get into more in depth later, because I don't want to. I feel like I agree that what Jake said, it'll make more sense if we delve into that as it gets uncovered in the synopsis. But like, for narrative reasons, eventually this is just kind of a weird opening, and then like Jake said, it's just like there's no point where it's really like cohesive, and it's that could be excusable in some sense, like if it was just poor cinematography, but it's a compelling scene. But it's a scene I feel like I've watched a million times in a million different shitty action movies or TV shows, but this time it's Vin Diesel. Like that's what it is. It's like, oh well, it's Vin Diesel in this situation.
I don't buy him as a Marine, man. He looks really ridiculous in the camo. I gotta be
I
honest.
know.
And the little helmet on his fucking thumb head.
Something about it just did not work visually.
And it kind of keeps going too, because then when you get to the like him on vacation with his wife, and he's got this like conventionally attractive blonde wife, and he seems completely unaffected by the mission, but also she's like, I wish you didn't have so many scars. And he says something about, I don't even remember what he says. There's some kind of corny
he
line
says
about
something about
scars.
he says something about the scars all having a story, and he's like, "What, you don't like my scars?" And she was like, "I don't like the stories they tell." And it was like, "Oh my
Something
god!"
like that.
And then he goes, "Well, you know what happens at the end of all the stories?
I come home.
Home. Yeah, and then I always come home is like the main like reoccurring thing, and I don't want to call it a theme movie, but like it's the most like typical like, we're a PG-13 movie, so we're gonna have like some light side boob and like back, but we can't have, and we're gonna like try to convince you that Vin Diesel pulls, and it's just all very run of the mill. There's only a 50% chance that he's laughing at me, because he's also could be laughing at Helldiver memes. So
No, I'm not watching Helldiver memes.
I swear.
But so yeah, everything up until his execution at the hands of Martin Axe is kind of like this, because even you have Martin Axe come in and he's wearing like flip-flops but a puffy winter coat. They're in a meat locker and he's playing, is this name of the song Psycho Killer?
Yes.
Yes, Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads, because you get it.
I
He's
hate
a Psycho
that
Killer
fucking song.
and he's dancing, and it's really on the like everything else, it is super on the nose.
And that guy looks like Bad
cliche.
Bunny too.
Toby Kebbell?
He looks like Bad Bunny.
He's white.
Okay, and he looks like Bad Bunny. Look up Bad Bunny and tell me
I know what Bad Bunny looks like. I don't think Toby
Dude,
Kebbell looks like Bad
they
Bunny.
look exactly the fucking same.
I need Matt and Sean's opinions on this. Maybe this will be the question I put on. We always have a question. If anyone listens to know, we always have a question you can answer underneath on Spotify when you listen to us on Spotify. So maybe I'll put it there, but at the very least in the comments on YouTube or something, and let us know if you think Toby Kebbell and Bad Bunny look the same.
You know what? I can see what Jason is getting at.
Thank you.
A little bit. He's like, certain
pictures more so than others.
And there are certain pictures where you go, oh, that's
like this one. He looks nothing like him, right? I'm showing them a picture for context, but you know, there's other ones that I'm like, that looks like the same dude to me. That one, I feel like they look similar.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. So it's all so run of the mill through that, and then after that, like kind of mercifully ends. Though killing someone with a cattle prod, which is how he kills people, is kind of cool. You just kind of get your first exposition dump of like, this is what Rising Spirit is. There's some really, really bad ADR of like wide shots of them in an elevator with their back turned, and very clearly changing the dialogue later. There was clearly some rewrites. So, and you get told about basically what Bloodshot is and what his powers are, and the enhanced strength and the healing. So on a slightly more positive note, I do enjoy the way the nanites are visualized. Both in terms of, I think like when they show them close up, it's like a pretty simple design. They look like kind of vaguely buggy, but in a way that I think is good. They don't need to be, they're just basically replacement blood cells that heal him really fast and make him like, they don't need to look super fancy. I don't want to like look at them and be like, I have no idea how this works. So I do like that, and I also think the nanites are black with little red dots, and they basically use this to show gore and blood that they couldn't usually do on the PG-13 rating. So you get a lot of shots that I think look pretty solid of like him cutting his hand and it healing itself. But how do y'all feel about the visualization of the nanites, since that's pretty important to the character?
Go.
Fuck you.
Okay, go.
I think it's fine. If not, I don't want to say it's ungeneric because I like the way that it looks, but also it reminds me to I like that it allows them to get away with things, because like Vin Diesel gets like half his face shot off, and they're able to get away with things like that, where it's like, oh, if this were blood, it'd be rated R, and so like you get some cool stuff like that. But it does give me a little bit of like the feelings of except I put it well above this, but it reminds me of in Transformers when they went from like the robots are transforming to they're all cubes and they just kind of don't transform anymore. Like, do you remember that?
No.
In the later Transformers movies, more like The Last Night and those,
Trying to block those out.
I didn't watch those.
They had Transformers that instead of like doing the whole Transformer part of their name, they were cubes that came together and turned into a robot, and then could also transform into whatever they want. But for the transformation sequences, they would just separate into cubes and then come back together.
Well, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
So that's what it kind of reminds me of, is the idea of Vin Diesel separating but into little bugs and then coming back together.
Is that the ones with Mark Wahlberg?
Yeah.
God, I hate that guy.
They're not good.
God, if I could piss on a man disrespectfully.
Not sexually.
Not sexually, disrespectfully.
Not sexually.
God, I hate Mark Wahlberg. Anyway.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I know I already told you guys this, but fun fact for listeners, Mark, two other people with a lot of allegations / confirmed things against them, depending on what you're talking about, are Mark Wahlberg and Jared Leto were the other finalists, from what I've heard, for the part of Bloodshot.
And you know who I hate more than Mark Wahlberg? Jared fucking Leto. God, I can't stand that piece of shit.
Mark Wahlberg would have been awful. Jared Leto would have also been miscast, but it would have been interesting.
It would have been interesting. He's another guy. I'd like to piss on his grave, though.
But none of these options were good.
They really know how to pick them, don't they?
God damn.
Not that they could get him for this slot, but like in my mind, I've always kind of seen Bloodshot as like a Tom Hardy type.
That's fair.
If that gives you anything, though, for like an upstart attempt at a cinematic universe, I kind of wish they just went with like a smaller, like a kind of no name, like a new guy. But anyway, that's not the point. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this kind of exposition heavy first act?
No, it's just super generic, and I want to
boring and drags. I was gonna say about the nanites, like, they look good enough. They're a little bit like, there's nothing that, like, when they show the close-ups, it's just like, oh, it's little like robot bugs. It's nothing crazy, but it looks cool, and it does the job. But yeah, the whole first act pretty like drags pretty much. It's pretty like boring and slow, I'd say. It takes a little while to really pick up the pace in terms of making you want to watch the movie.
Yeah, I think a lot of where this movie comes down to having issues is just somebody thought they could write better than what the original kind of had, and oof. It, like, the beginning of this is so generic. The thing that sucks about this movie too is, even with all the changes that they've made, I can see something good in there to a degree if it had been written more. If it had like a more nuanced writer behind it, and like the writing was a bit more just smart, because it feels like whoever wrote this kind of like wrote they took some generic spec script that they have and
Yeah,
then threw Bloodshot into it.
it
I
didn't feel
don't.
fully fleshed out, and it didn't feel like there was a reason for like it to be a Bloodshot movie.
So one of the things that interests me a little bit is Eric Heiser, the one of the screenwriters. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie Arrival, but he previously won an Oscar for his writing of the
Oh,
screenplay of Arrival,
I didn't
Uh-huh.
see that.
directed by Denis Villeneuve. So a little
Oh,
bit of like
love him.
background. So this movie was an attempt to start a Valiant cinematic universe, at the time when that was really, really hot. Obviously, people still try to do that now, but superhero films have taken a little bit more, they've taken some hits recently. So at the time, the intent was for this to be made to make a movie based on the Valiant comic Harbinger, give them each a sequel, and then cross them over for a movie based on the comic Harbinger Wars. Excellent. All those books are excellent. I highly recommend most Valiant stuff. So that was the attempt. It was Sony's other bid. This movie was produced, distributed. This is a Sony Pictures movie of we want our own cinematic universe. We've since, we're sharing Spider-Man now, and we're doing our weird Spider-Man spinoffs, but we want our own thing that we have like full authority over. And this was an attempt at that. So I do think this movie reeks of like Sony wanting changes made. And then the other thing that comes into play is this movie was entering production right as Valiant was getting the people who originally brought back Valiant back from the dead in 2012 got bought out by DMG. So I'm not sure how much of any say like DMG came in and said like, well, we want this different and that different, and how much they were allowed to do, because Dinesh Shamdasani, who was one of the two people that helped provide Valiant in the first place, was still involved with this movie. Anyway, Eric Heiser, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, actually has written a handful of Valiant comics, but then during the acquisition from DMG, left the company, as well as a mass exodus of other writing talent. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff here that I think explains especially some of the really bad ADR and just potential discrepancies of quality, while some parts are much better than others, I think.
Yeah, and just real quick, since you mentioned the ADR, and while it's on my mind, I want to take a moment to point out that like the bad ADR and re-recorded lines and all that were still very noticeable upon rewatching, but it was like so bad in theaters.
It was
Like,
so noticeable.
I kept like looking around like, is there water in my fucking ears or something? Like, am I going crazy, or is this movie like did they just not hire a sound mixer? Like,
Yeah, it's for ADR, for anyone listening that doesn't know, it stands for automated dialogue replacement, and it's a post-production process that basically it can be a very useful tool. It is very normal and fine to use ADR where you realize you didn't actually we're changing the dialogue a little bit because we decided something works better, or we thought we got a take and we didn't, and we're gonna
the
like
mic didn't pick it up well.
yeah, and
Whatever.
we're just
It
gonna
happens in almost any
sparingly
movie or
use
TV
it.
show.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Pretty much anything. And we're going to sparingly use it in shots where you can't see the actor's who's talking's face, to just correct that. But when it happens sometimes, especially in big blockbusters that have a lot of interference from the studios that want a bunch of changes late in the game, and you have a situation where, okay, well, we didn't really shoot for coverage, so now we need a kind of rushed CGI shot of the outside of this building with them characters going down in the elevator and they're facing the wrong way. And basically ADR is and everything, but you don't notice good ADR unless you do sound mixing for a living. But if you've ever watched something and gone, that did not seem to be the words coming out of that person's mouth, it's probably bad ADR.
Or when
So-
the like tone just shifts randomly, which happens
Yeah.
all the fucking time in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I was losing it when we were watching it in the theater.
But you know what wasn't ADR?
5 years.
5 years?
So the next little bit of the movie is a little bit rough still, in my opinion, though it's at least a little more watchable, where Ray is introduced to the other patients at RST, not PRS. RST, Harding's other patients, former U.S. Navy diver KT, former U.S. Army Ranger Marcus Tibbs, and ex-Navy SEAL Jimmy Dalton. KT's enhancements allow her to breathe in any conditions, including like underwater, or if there's like, some kind of gas attack. Tibbs has 360-degree vision thanks to like a device that's built into like his kind of chest shoulder area. And are you laughing at gas attack?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Jason's just imagining somebody farting in the same room as her, and she's able to just fucking survive that shit.
She breathes out of titties. And Dalton has robotic legs that are like, he could like run really fast. They're strong, jump, yada yada yada. You run of the mill enhanced robot legs.
Strong.
So
Run of the mill.
After experiencing Flat, he especially bonds with KT, who gives him this like medal she got from her time in the Navy, before he starts having flashbacks of Gina and Axe, and he abruptly leaves to avenge Gina's death. Using the nanites and the RST servers, he hacks into the databases, because this is definitely comic accurate in a way that hacking superpowers in general are so dumb. But I do appreciate that. I think for this character that is like on the surface big man with guns, giving him something a little bit more creative, and that he can like access any, like that the nanites can
Hack into the
access
mainframe.
anything with internet, basically.
You mean hack into the mainframe?
Which makes him very versatile. It also adds, the comics get into, they kind of have a life of their own, and he starts having hallucinations of them talking to him, and that's really cool, but that's for another time. Anyway, so he gets into the databases and tracks Axe to Budapest, where he kills them along with his bodyguards in what I think is a very good action sequence that I want to talk about more when I'm done this paragraph. And then back at RST, he's put back to sleep again after being kind of scolded by Harding for taking that risk, and his nanites are rebooted. It's then when we get like the big reveal that this has occurred many times before. Harding replaces Ray's memories with a new scenario of how Gina died, this time with another former associate of RST, Nick Barris, as the culprit, to manipulate the amnesiac and superpowered Ray to kill his enemies for him. KT has grown attached to Ray after all these repeated manufactured scenarios, and begins to object to Harding repeatedly manipulating Ray's memories so that he'll kill different targets without question or remorse. But she is ignored and reminded that RST can kill her by deactivating her enhancements. So, okay, before the reveal, I'm very interested on your thoughts on the RST team, Tibbs, Dalton, and KT, and I guess Harding as well, because I think that is the biggest missed opportunity in the movie, is not giving more time to see them bond beyond just him and KT, which feels like a very superficial bond of he is attracted to her and she is nice, and the others are a little bit more abrasive. And as well as the fight scene where he, still under the belief that he is just recently revived and going after his wife's killer, kills Axe and all of his men in this tunnel, which I know I think is a very impressive action piece, where you get to see how much of a tank Bloodshot is. Like Sean mentioned earlier, taking like shotguns to the face and his face reforming in what looks pretty cool. Pulling the grenades on people's vests and holding them up to blast doors on cars to get in, and just being unstoppable and just kind of tearing through people. It's also pretty cleverly lit with a red lighting that really enhances the look of the nanites to be a little bit more red than they are. I think it's a pretty well lit, well shot action and an entertaining action scene. And I do know it was really, really hard for them to film, because Flower is in the setup of the shot of the scene is that he crashes a flour truck, a truck with a bunch of that's delivering a bunch of flour, and the flour goes everywhere in this tunnel, and he kind of pins people in and goes after them. Flour is super flammable, and there's flares going on, so they had to find something that would look right as flour but wasn't flammable and would capture it. It's really visually interesting, and apparently it was a huge pain in the ass to shoot. But anyway, that's how do you guys feel about the team, and how do you guys feel about that set piece?
Yeah, I think I'd agree that one of the biggest missed opportunities here is not spending more time with the team. I think there's moments where it shows the potential of how cool each of the team member can be in their powers and how effective they can be. And there's a particular scene that we'll get to later that I'm thinking of, but it's just kind of too little too late by the time we get to that point. It's well, that's cool, but that came out of fucking nowhere, wasn't established. I didn't see, we could have had a scene before this. I could have seen this guy doing this cool shit that would have made me more entertained by this movie 20 minutes ago, and it probably would have been better for it. So and we'll get more into specifics because there's a fight scene later, an action sequence later that like I said is just kind of too little too late in terms of that. But yeah, it's just disappointing because they kind of intentionally flaunt what they could have done later on, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think that's another one of the bigger things for me too, is that this is the first action sequence is I mean the first action sequence we see later on with him as Bloodshot in that tunnel with the flower and everything is prior to this is around the part where the movie finally picks up, and its biggest issue is it's just too little too late. I'm not invested in this anymore. And
I already got bored 30 minutes ago.
you look at the action scene, you go awesome, but everything leading up to this was debilitatingly boring. So it's
generic.
It sucks because it's you see, this is what I meant by on top of it, you see good parts in this movie of things that could genuinely work, but the way that this movie leads itself up really hurts it so much, and then I turn off my brain in the beginning, and that's the only way to really get to the parts that are oh man, that action scene was cool, which sucks because this should have you can see potential in some of the things in this.
Absolutely. I mean the action scene in the tunnel is easily, I think, one of the most entertaining scenes in the whole movie. And it's in isolation a very good scene, but it's one of those things, it's I'm already dozing off out of it by this point, it's just such a slog fest to get through the beginning. And yeah, it's like I said, in isolation it's a fantastic action scene. I think it has everything you want from an action scene. It's
also, I think it's so unique and cool because you have the flower in a tunnel, it's dark, it's dimly lit, and they for being dimly lit, they do a really good job of framing everything at the very least, and because it's a tunnel, they don't really need to care that much about where are certain things within the scene. It's a tunnel. But it really shines in that the flower allows for the lighting to look as great as it does, and it's dark and creepy, so you have essentially Vin Diesel creeping around murdering people. So I guess that's
and it's like I said, it's everything. It has everything that you want in an action scene. It's fun and entertaining. It's shot decent. There's destruction and cool deaths and cool fucking weapon usage and shit. I don't fucking know. It's got everything you want. If only the rest of the movie could learn from that scene and give us what we wanted.
So, okay. A little bit more plot. Then I definitely have more thoughts because I got so many, because I always do, and because this was my pick. So they awaken Gray again. He's once again has amnesia and is reintroduced to the RST team again. You kind of see the whole thing, the whole introduction process again, but with this new a little bit sped through with this new context. He then starts experiencing flashbacks of now Barris kidnapping and killing him and Gina. Driven by revenge again, he tracks Barris to East Sussex and kills him, despite the man pleading that RST is lying. Wilfred Wiggins, a programmer forced to work for Barris, activates an EMP bomb that incapacitates, and severs his link with RST. Ray awakens in Wiggins' office and experiences multiple contradicting memories of who killed Gina. Wiggins explains to him that RST has been manipulating him so he would kill Harding's former associates turned whistleblowers. Ray tracks down Gina, not only learning that she's still alive, but that the relationship actually ended. Say it with me now, guys. 5 years ago. Yeah. And that is exactly how Vin Diesel delivers that line when he is informed that his relationship with Gina ended prior to him talking to her now, and she has since started a new life and a new family in London and moved on. So the reveal. I think it's a good reveal if you're I knew this was coming as someone who was familiar with the character, but I do think it is a genuinely good reveal if you aren't. That's what I think the only reason it's such a shocking reveal is because it's so easy to believe that this is just a total garbage generic movie. They seem to have intentionally made the first half of the movie boring and generic so that when this happens, it hits. And I guess it hits in a sense, but it's too late. And I think the comparison I'd make is actually Jason, because we talked about Wrath of Man earlier. Wrath of Man is a movie. It's a Guy Ritchie film, very, very talented kind of, work for hire filmmaker. And posits itself initially as just a standard. It is a Jason Statham revenge flick. And but it is, and you eventually come to find out a reveal about character motivations that I won't say because I think it's a genuinely good reveal, and I wouldn't want to spoil a movie I recommend for anyone. But before that, even though it seems pretty standard, it is all of the action is great. Jason Statham has a lot of inherent charisma that I'm sorry, unless he's playing Dominic Toretto or maybe Riddick, I don't think Vin Diesel really has. Or one-line characters like Groot or the Iron Giant. But it is a standard movie, but it is still enjoyable enough. It kind of does its job as a pretty good movie. One of those movies that you watch and you are thoroughly enjoy throughout, but then forget after until the twist hits, and then it's oh, this is really good. Bloodshot's just bad until the twist hits, and then you're like, this is okay.
At which point it acknowledges that it was
bad
generic, because
there's
literally a line where they reference the fact that the fake memory that they gave him was too over the top and on the nose. So as the viewer, not knowing that that was a fake memory and thinking that this is just his origin story, we all thought that it was just generic and too on the nose and over the top.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of when you watch something that thinks it's so clever and meta, and it has story structure issues and it has third act problems, but they think if they just have a one-liner about stores that have third act problems in their story with a third act problem, it fixes it, but it doesn't. You still have an issue. It's okay, I get that you're acknowledging how stupid everything before this was, but I still sat through 40 minutes of stupid,
right?
And
that's
ugly,
what I mean.
And
it's
largely poorly shot. Up until the tunnel sequence, everything's pretty bad. Yeah,
it's why? It's if if we were in on it the whole time as the viewer and we know, like, this is just a fake memory, he's planting it inside of him to kill people, and we get that it's supposed to be over the top, then it makes sense as a scene. But we don't get that payoff until like an hour after we watched the scene. So it's like, okay, I already fell asleep. They waited too long.
We do get some admittedly, I think, funny jokes here mostly from Eric, who is he works for he's this tech guy that works for RST and is like kind of a little dweeb who wants to be cool and is very insecure about his dick size, which is kind of a dumb joke, but I laugh at it. I just do. Who like is trying who is also responsible for some of like the punch ups in the script with the Bloodshot stuff, and him getting I don't know. Him getting shit on by coworkers and by his dick boss is just inherently funny because that's a thing that like most people have been through. So everything with
Everyone
Eric,
has
I
a
really laugh
coworker
at.
that's like pretty like has the role of Eric, even if their personality is different.
Yeah, they've been that coworker, they've had
Yeah.
that asshole boss.
Yep.
Eric is so clearly like this is a paycheck job for him. He does not give a shit about Harding's revenge scheme. He doesn't. He's just like
He doesn't care that he's doing something morally wrong by being there. He doesn't care if it's good or bad.
But I think he's a dude who just needs to make rent.
That's what I'm saying.
He is maybe. Ray's a decently well-rounded character, but honestly, Eric is maybe a more well-rounded character than any of the RST people, than like Tibbs, Dalton, or like Dalton is just a dick for no reason. And is constantly chewing gum. And Sam Heughan, I'm sorry, he's awful in this movie. He may be a good actor in general, but he's hamming it up in this, and he's just a generic asshole, but not in a fun way.
Tibbs is so stereotypical, and he's just a diet Derek Carr.
Yes. He does look like Derek Carr.
Also,
Tibbs has a cool helmet that they show once.
Oh.
I get like an hour into the movie.
But he like greets Ray nicely, and then after that is just a goon. And then KT is an absolute carry job from Isa Gonzalez, who I think is like absolute movie star. She's great in everything I've seen her in, but if I have to like recommend you one thing, go watch Ambulance. It's just like a nonstop adrenaline rush.
God,
it's so much fun.
So
and now these like
fun.
Now I walked into that movie like I couldn't sleep afterwards. I saw late night showing, and it was just so thrilling. But you walk out and you're like, the all three leads in that movie are great, but because she's in this and I'm talking about her, I walked out and was like, Isa Gonzalez, a superstar, movie star, put her in anything she wants to be in. And KT is a nothing character. Like, she's just kind of there. She's kind. Her fight scenes are cool. But like okay.
It's one good fight scene, though.
Yeah. I know she's like, you're right. She only really has like one real fight moment. But she's like, okay, I know she's a wounded vet, but so is Ray, so is Tibbs, so is Dalton. Why is she different? Like, where is her conscience coming from when they don't seem to have one? And this all goes into what I think they should have done of like, if you guys remember when we covered Incredible Hulk, one of the things we all kind of praise is that rather than going through the origin story again, it just has an opening credit sequence that tells it, and then you can kind of jump into things. And without that, they would have had to cut like the tender moments between Betty and Bruce, or moments between Betty and her dad. I think the Bloodshot origin, I think you should have had an opening credit sequence of him saving the hostages, getting him and his wife getting killed, and then started the movie with him waking up at RST. And then that way you can do a whole mission of him with the team. You can get to know them. You can establish a bond as fellow injured veterans. You can spend a lot more time on that. And then also you get to put your twist in much earlier about what's really going on there.
Therefore, hooking more people in right at the start
of your movie suck. Yes, and make it better, but yeah. So I don't. Okay, I'll leave it at this. You know why these characters are very well maybe underdeveloped? Bloodshot is the only character in this movie that's from the comic books. The only one.
Yeah.
So the Wiggins and like the RST like villains or whatever show up in like one or two issues the summer after this came out. And then were promptly never used again. There are characters from the comics that Harding, who it seems to be based off of, the guy who runs Project Rising Spirit in the comic books, which is like a giant global military contractor like Lockheed Martin is for us, and is like a known thing, but is secretly doing all this other stuff, and not just some random tech company in Asia. I believe it's Malaysia that it's set for this, even though it's filmed in South Africa. Anyway, so, and there is a set of people, again, I mentioned they were supposed to cross over, do a Harbinger movie, which is characters that have different, basically trauma induces powers in them by activating a segment of a part of their brain that's not everyone is born with. And in Rising Spirit's whole thing is wanting to kill, they're called psiots, and wanting to just wipe out psiots because they're a threat to humanity. It's, again, it's oversimplification, but if you think like mutants and Weapon X and, Sentinel program and all that. So there's a group of people at Project Rising Spirit called Hardcore, because again, these things were created in the 90s, so HARD is an acronym and core is CORPS, that are humans that are not psiots, that have had experiments done on them to put technology in their brain to have them gain psiot-like powers for a short period of time, but it also drastically shortens their lifespan. And they do this to desperate people such as wounded veterans. So I think these guys are supposed to be inspired by that, but are not given any of the depth or lore. They're just kind of there. And I wonder if some of their underdevelopment comes from the fact that they were thrown in rather than just using existing groundwork that has been laid out for you that you can just pull from and include.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, because to stray from the path, good band by the way, to stray from the path, but to follow it, to parallel it, like ultimately you have something that's functionally the same as the source material, but worse and renamed for no real reason.
It's also like other changes to Ray's backstory. It's not as simple. It's all bullshit. Like, he never knew a Gina. It's up in the air about if Ray's even actually his name. PTSD is like the main thing of most Bloodshot books, and overcoming that trauma. And it's just kind of not present in this, I think.
Yeah, it feels like his only,
all people with
his
prosthetics.
Only real trauma that he comes with is finding out about Gina and how their relationship ended 5 years ago, which, granted, would be very traumatic. But, like, there's so much other traumatic shit that he was put through in that movie, and that the others were put through in that movie, the other members of the crew, and that they just don't really delve into, that would have been a much more compelling angle.
So I'll wrap up the story real quick. Harding sends KT after Wiggins, but after KT asks Wiggins for help in freeing herself from RST's control and taking down the corporation, she returns to RST and tells Harding that she failed to capture the programmer and tries to maintain her cover. Meanwhile, Ray is recaptured by Dalton and Tibbs and brought back to the lab. KT and Wiggins sabotage the reprogramming process and destroy RST's computers. Ray awakens, not fully recharged, but Dalton and Tibbs try to subdue him. After a lengthy battle, he kills them as the RST building collapses. Harding confronts Ray with the grenade launcher, confident that the soldier will surrender now that his nanites have been exhausted, thinking he needs him for purpose and for staying alive. To his surprise, Ray is willing to die to achieve victory and activates a grenade that the nanites deconstruct as it shot at him, killing them both. Ray later awakes with his full memories intact, revived by Wiggins, who had preserved a handful of nanites and has updated the technology so that they are now self-sufficient. They and KT then leave in search of a new life. So I have a lot of pros, but also a good number of cons for the third act. First thing, main thing, I think the action is good again. I do like the fight with Tibbs. I like both the chase sequence of Tibbs and Dalton capturing Ray. I like KT's fight with some guards when sneaking off with Wiggins. I like her blowing up blowing up the servers, and I really like the final fight with Tibbs and Dalton, who now has robo arms as well, which also have cattle prods in them. The thing that was used in the memory is to kill the fictional wife, which I thought was a nice touch. And for a movie that had like a $40 to $50 million budget, I think the CG looks pretty decent. And I think it's a really fun set piece, him fighting the two of them as they fall down an elevator shaft and the building collapses. I also like the culmination of his body reforming as he walks towards Harding as the nanites deconstruct the grenade. And I think ultimately the conclusion of, I'm just trying to do the positives out of the way, of the moment of Harding saying, like, he says, you're nothing without, you're out of nanites, you're just Ray Garrison, and he says that's enough and is willing to die to take out Harding and RST. I think that's like a very good conclusion of Bloodshot's arc. I think it's a cool moment, and I think it looks good, and I have fun with it. That's the positives. What are your positives?
I agree with everything you said. The worst thing about this scene is the fact that we get to see Vin Diesel finally look more comic accurate with white skin and red glowing dot in his chest, and it looks really cool. And it's like, oh, to him, would have been cool if he looked like that during the fucking movie.
Yeah. I literally can't add anything to what Jake said because this movie is just so surface level. Like, except for like the twist itself, they don't really do, anything unique after that, which is very disappointing because the potential was there, right? The potential was there for the movie to be really good, for the twist to really, throw a loop at you, and then the real movie starts. But no, it's just, it's just going on like a kid's roller coaster, and then it has like one loop-de-loop, and that's it.
It's
There's
like
not really anything
Good analogy.
Do you mean like the ride in SpongeBob where they go up the hill slightly and they start screaming?
Yeah.
And then they keep
exactly.
going around in a circle and it just keeps going up that tiny fucking hill.
That's exactly
it's really
it.
like the beginning of the movie, like or not even, I won't even say the beginning. Like, looking at the movie as a whole, it almost feels like they paced it in a way that like they thought it was gonna be a really clever, slow, unraveling plot, but like they didn't actually put in the parts where it slowly unravels and where like, because like, you know what I mean, like where there's tons of movies, like Wrath of Man is a great one where it like gives you seeds of the twist and it unravels in front of you, and it's like a beautiful story arc and whatnot. Like, it's paced like they thought they were gonna do that, but they didn't actually take the time to establish it throughout the movie.
Well, like,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, to add to that I liked the idea that like of like giving out hints slowly over time. Like, I think one of the things before you see the the thing that pissed me off was that, like, what's his name? The one guy who's an asshole who has the robo legs.
Derek Carr.
What? Dalton is the character name.
Dalton's the name that I was trying to figure out. So Dalton, when he like first puts Vin Diesel under to make him forget his memories, is he sticks the piece of gum underneath the seat that he's on, but there's a bunch of pieces of gum underneath there, leading us to know that it's happened a lot. So like, that's a small detail that would have been neat, but the way that they throw it in there is like, it's unnecessary, because at that point he goes over his whole spiel of everything.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's they tried to plant a seed there, but it was like, well, you're planting a seed, the first seed in the same scene where you're just explaining all of it.
Where you've
Well,
explained
he
everything
literally
to me.
ruined the twist. He literally ruined the twist by just dumping exposition, right? While him just saying, have a good night's rest or sweet dreams, and then you see he sticks the gum in the bottom, and then we see all like the previous pieces of gum that were on the bottom there. That would have been perfect, right? It's just show don't tell, but no, they decided to tell and then show, but by then it's redundant, and you're just like, get on with it already. Like, oh, this movie is
Yeah,
very
it's
poorly
like
paced.
I really feel like it was trying to go for an angle of a like mind game, slowly give you the twist thing, but they just couldn't be fucked to actually write in the slowly paced out,
Yeah,
articulate
basically they got lazy.
twist.
I at least like the twist.
I
I'll give it that much.
with
Kind of.
better context, it's a good twist.
Yeah.
With a better movie, it would have been a better twist.
Well, that's kind of what
And
I'm.
My true. My big issue ultimately with the ending though is just that it's too clean. I think showing Ray willing to die for this is a really great character moment and really tells you a lot about who he is. But this is what I'll say about the movie. I keep calling him Ray. And it's because I don't feel it doesn't you know what I mean? Like he doesn't feel like Bloodshot. It does this whole like it very much seems to have the whole you have to earn the iconic thing. Because like as Jason talked about earlier, like Bloodshot in the comics, he has chalk white skin, red, just completely red eyes, like jet black hair. He's usually either shirtless or in all black clothing, and there's a red dot on his chest. In this movie, he's just Vin Diesel, sometimes wearing black clothing. And as he uses the nanites more, he starts to get paler, and his chest starts to glow in a vaguely circle shape. And the closest we get to it looking like that is at the very end, and then it's fleeting. So anyway, but my real issue is he makes this sacrifice, and I understand that you want to do sequels, and I'm fine with that. There's a lot of Bloodshot stories to tell, so you're not going to kill him off. But the movie ends with his memories fully intact, his nanites fully restored and now unlimited, so his weakness is gone, and he's happy friend time with KT and Wiggins. And I like Wiggins. I like KT mostly because I like Isaac Gonzalez and think she carries that character, which is very thin. And Vin Diesel I don't like as Bloodshot. He was better than I expected, but still very miscast. But like there needs to be a consequence. Like they literally drive off into the sunset, and Wiggins makes a joke about that, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean it's not dumb. Again, you're making a joke doesn't change
itself being dumb.
I like the idea that like, okay, Wiggins was able to save some nanites and resurrect Ray, but so the other thing is like in the comics, the nanites rely on protein to refuel, so he needs to like constantly be eating protein. Which makes for it's almost like when Spider-Man runs out of webbing. Like if like Bloodshot doesn't have enough red meat. But like maybe he saves them, but he doesn't have nanites left. Maybe he saves them, but the nanites are weakened and they don't know how to recreate them. Maybe one of the three of them dies. Like there needs to be some kind of consequence, and instead it's just like a pretty happy ending. And that leads me to something that to me confirms how much this movie changed from its original intent. There was a deleted post-credit scene. And I know post-credit scenes don't fix whole movies, but it tells me this was supposed to go differently. The after-credit scene that we had talked about that Vin fell in love with, this is from Dinesh Shamdasani, who I mentioned before, was you'd see Bloodshot at the end of the movie after some undisclosed amount of time later on his own. He describes a sequence where Bloodshot will be in full regalia, complete with his signature comic book look and weaponry of Desert Eagle handguns and katana swords on his back. He'll be in an urban environment, but open the door, and suddenly behind this door it's a vast, snowy landscape, trees, forests. You see snowflakes coming out of the door that intercept our urban environment. He's very confused. It's a magical realism inside a sci-fi film. From there, inside the snow-frosted forest, Bloodshot comes face to face with a massive, unnaturally large direwolf to be voiced by Ken Watanabe. The direwolf doesn't move its mouth, but you hear it telepathically speak. It's Toya Harada, which is a very, very important character from the comic books, perhaps the most important character in Valiant comic books, and very important for the things that when they announced these movies, they said they were adapting. He is essential. And he is the main person that Rising Spirit is trying to stop. It's kind of two evils. Not a lot of clear morals. He speaks to Bloodshot telepathically and tells him he has a choice to make. The sequence ends up with the close-up on Bloodshot's completely red eyes as he says, "I've made my choice." That is telling me, well, again, the post-credit scene itself, I would have been hyped for that because it would have been teasing an adaptation of a comic I love, does not fix a movie's issues. Like, you would presumably still have a lot of that first act stuff that would still be an issue. But it tells me you end the movie with, you're ending the movie with Bloodshot fully looking like Bloodshot. I still don't love the having to earn that look, but it's something. You end the movie with him on his own, not with a bunch of friends, and clearly still traumatized and still working through it. And it adds to the world of it all. And it also tells me that there was going to be more to Rising Spirit, that they were going to be an organization created to hunt Psyops and specifically to kill this guy, Toya Harada, who I won't spiel about because I'd go on for hours. So I don't know where these changes came in. I don't know when. Also, Ken Watanabe was going to be him. Awesome. But clearly this movie was not supposed to have this exact ending and this exact plot line. And it just, every time I think about that, it makes me a little bit sad.
Yeah, it's definitely just like wrapped up a little too neatly. It's for a guy who has been through so much shit in this movie on paper, like to just be like, oh, I found friends.
Also, for something that's supposed to lead into like your shared universe.
And I died, but I got brought back to life stronger, so nothing matters.
It just, I mean, like, if it's supposed to bleed into your shared universe, there's, like, I don't, like, I'm trying to remember, like, with the MCU and what you see first, which is, like, what was it? I'm trying to remember what the first, like, post-credit we had was. It was an Iron Man, and it was...
Yeah, it's Nick Fury.
It's Nick Fury.
You just become a part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet.
Which is like, that's a great, like, you're opening into like this whole world, and it's just, with everything ending so cleanly in this, it makes you feel like there's not much more that you can go with. There's nothing else. I mean, like, it ends generically in the way of like you're starting fresh and like the notion that I didn't need this movie to begin with, because it ends with he has his powers, he has friends, he's off doing his own thing. It's cut and dry, and whatever we see next is, you know, new entirely. It just, I don't know, it doesn't rub me the right way, especially taking into account.
Can I rub you the right way?
What?
Can I rub you the right way?
Oh, yes, please. But like, yeah, it just doesn't, it makes it end too clean, and because of that, it makes it like, speaking towards specifically it setting up its own universe and taking out entirely that it's not that good of a movie to begin with. It feels like, yeah, maybe they should have led into something more. And while like, I hearing about that ending and without context of like, if you just took everything out, or took like the ending that they had, or just threw that thing in here, I feel like it would make no sense to like a
That's
general.
That's what I mean. Like, they had to have changed other things.
It like, I'm just imagining the idea of them like shoving that in at the end of this movie, like the movie that we got, and it like doesn't make any fucking sense, and you just kind of go like, what the fuck?
Where are his friends? Why does he look completely different? What's the wolf?
Why is there a wolf? Why is it talking? Oh dear God! Why is he? You know what? I don't think anybody would question why Ken Watanabe's in this. I'd be down for whatever he's in. Thank God. That would you know what? That would be the one thing to change this movie from being an okay movie to a fantastic movie. Ken Watanabe is a big wolf.
So the
Big
characters are very little alike, but basically you'd be setting up Ken Watanabe to be Valiant Thanos. Like he would be your overarching, constantly appearing, super threatening. He's like the guy.
Yeah. So like that's why I feel like introducing something like that gives you much more to work with later on, because I mean, like, again, when thinking of like how the MCU started, their whole thing was introducing Nick Fury, which isn't a villain obviously, but introduces you to a whole of like potential of there's something bigger going on idea. You don't have to know the character so much, but it gives you like there's a larger world and yeah, there's a larger world here. It does a good amount of world building while not doing too much. And in this one, it just ends and cuts the movie off, and we have nothing to go on for later. And like, obviously, again, I'm assuming that's probably because like you don't want to just shove in sequel bait when you don't know if you're going to get a second movie. Which, I mean, I guess this thing came out during such a fucking tumultuous time that like who the fuck knew. But like it still feels like it needs to something to like it shouldn't have been wrapped in a pretty bow.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. I mean, I guess we can final thoughts it. Like, I'm gonna be honest. I picked the movie, but I don't generally recommend it. I have a slight caveat in that, like, one of the reasons I picked the movie is we used to, at the earliest of this podcast, we watched the movies together. We were all in the same area, and we were able to do that for this, and I really wanted to do that because I've kind of missed that watching a corny movie with you guys. You know, I think when you're watching with a group of friends, kind of corny, bad to mid movies are like almost better than watching a great movie together, because if you're not in a theater, you're gonna not be 100% focused. It's just human nature, and I missed that. And the other reason I recommended it is the world of Valiant is so special to me, and this occupies a weird kind of part of nostalgia in my brain, in that in the early days of like comic book movies and like, you know, like the 2000s, like early aughts, where there wasn't like massive yet, and it was like still kind of a niche interest. You know, you got a Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, and it was sort of enjoyable, but not good and strange. But like, you didn't know if you were ever going to get that again, so you kind of held close to it. There is a lot of the Valiant movies and shows that have been development hell for many years, including a sequel to this, that are not officially canceled, but are probably never going to happen. And this very well may be the only Valiant adaptation I get in my lifetime. So there's a part of me that holds it dear and holds a weird, strange love, and like every once in a while I get a weird craving to watch it. And that kind of happened here. So I don't generally recommend it, but if you're gonna do it, get together with some buds, maybe have a few drinks, have a good time. It can be enjoyed that way. And I also do want to recommend Bloodshot comic books and Valiant Comics as a whole, specifically the 2012 Bloodshot series. It went through a few different writers and many artists, but it was originally written by Dwayne, and I'm going to say this horribly wrong, Swierczynski, Swerczynski, and Dwayne is Duane. Really, really great book that eventually led to a 4-issue series called The Valiant, which is very Bloodshot focused, and then Jeff Lemire and various artists had a just unimpeachable run on some Bloodshot books after that. So I definitely recommend, you can look up Bloodshot reading order and you'll find it. But Valiant reading order, really recommend that stuff. And if you do check that out and you do grow attached to that world and those characters as I have, then I say this is worth checking out, because maybe it'll occupy that same weird space of heart and brain for you that it does for me. That said, highlight is the action. It's the only time that the character of Bloodshot is in a physical way the closest he looks to actually like looking like the character and not just Vin Diesel. And also, like, I think the action is very entertaining in its own right, as well as being true to how I would picture that character in motion fighting. Just very brutal, remorseless, and just an absolutely just like battering ram. And the nanites look cool as shit, especially when his like face gets blown up or his hand gets blown up or whatever, and it reforms. The lowlights is the first like third to half of the movie that is really poorly made generic film, all in the service of a twist that comes too little too late and at the cost of developing the supporting cast. That's basically all my thoughts for now until I remember something after we hang up.
If you ask me if I recommend this movie, I'd say no. And if you asked me if it was a good movie, I'd also say no. But if you ask me if I like this movie, I would say yes. And if you asked me to explain that, I couldn't. So,
I thought you were going to say no.
I'm happy to hear that. That makes me unreasonably happy to hear.
There's just something intangible about this movie that like makes me smile, and I didn't like it, or no, I didn't think it was a good movie the first time, second time, or third time. I'll probably never think it's a good movie because it's not, but I like watching it. It's fun to me. I don't know.
It could be
It's one of those
forever
things
entwined with that weird moment of life.
It's one of those things like, yeah, possibly, but it's one of those like I heard someone from a band that went on a lot of Warped Tours that like every year when they were on Warped Tour they were like, damn, this is so long and grueling, this sucks, we're never doing it again. And then by the time they got the next offer, all they remembered was the positives of it. So I feel like that's kind of this movie for me. It's like, God, this fucking sucks. But then by the time I like, a year goes by, I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of funny. And the action's pretty cool. So that said, the highlight for me is just, I think, simply the thing that caused the biggest reaction out of me, which is Vin Diesel saying, 5 years. In that it's my highlight because simply it caused the most joy on this rewatch for me. I was cracking the fuck up because I did not remember that at all. But I'll never forget it now.
Made this rewatch 10 times better.
The low point for me is probably the fact that he doesn't look like Bloodshot the whole fucking movie, and Bloodshot looks cool. When he does look like Bloodshot, he looks cool. But they said fuck you, I guess.
It's my turn. So the movie was pretty fun, but I think it's mostly due to the fact that I was with these guys and there was alcohol. So I'm a little biased when I say I did enjoy my time with this movie. I won't recommend it at all because for the reasons stated before, and this movie sucks. But it's fun. It's fun to make fun of. I'll give it that. But other than that, you don't need to watch it. You can just skip it. Not like you can skip this film and go to another Valiant film, because this is the only one. To Jake's dismay.
Too soon.
Art, rest in peace.
Some other missed potential is that there was a Eternal Warrior movie that Dave Bautista was attached to. I believe her name is Bernie Feldstein from, I don't know if you've ever seen like Booksmart. She's a very funny. She was also in Sean, you saw Drive Away Dolls. She was like the ex-girlfriend in Drive Away Dolls. Was attached to play Faith in the Harbinger movies, and there's been a bunch of things, but then as far as like talent attached, there was also supposed to be a show based on the comic Quantum and Woody to star Joel McHale, and none of that's happened. And I hurt. Sorry, Sean, you can give your wrap-up thoughts now. It hurts.
Do I recommend this movie? No. Do I think this movie is good? No. Do I like this movie? No. I
No.
know. I actually do kind of like this movie just for the generic action flick that it is. There's like there's fun in there, and especially in the latter half of the movie, it's so much more fun, and it does so many more interesting and unique things with like the action sequences that's the part that makes me go like, I love it. It fulfills the need for action in my brain. The rest of it can go eat shit. But I'll appreciate it for what it gave me, and I'll enjoy the action, and that will be it.
All right. I feel like I successfully staged a coup by getting you all to like tacitly admit that you had fun with this. But that's all for us for today. Thank you to Alofett, ALOFETT for the podcast artwork. Thank you to Jason for the podcast music.
Yes, the podcast music, I made it. The Upsides on SoundCloud, the Upsides PA on Instagrizzy, and the _Upsides PA on Twitter. I'm working on stuff that'll be out eventually. And to be clear, I haven't just been like tirelessly working on like 4 songs for the past 3 years. I am depressed and have a low self-esteem and work full-time. So like I fit it in when I can. I'm a busy guy and I'm tired.
Thank you to my friends for loving me, even though I'm someone who says, let's watch Bloodshot for my episode of the podcast. And also for being someone who says, hey guys, we should have a podcast. Thank you to the listeners for listening to this tomfoolery. Please follow us, Culturally Illiterate, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Culturally Illiterate Podcast on YouTube, at @illiterate_pod for any socials. Reach out at culturalliteratepod@gmail.com for questions, comments, whatever. Leave reviews wherever. And we're going to continue one shots next week with another pick from Matt, which is drumroll.
I actually have a few, and I just can't decide. So I want this to be a discussion.
Okay, well then we will let you know. And goodbye for now. We'll leave you in suspense. Bye.